Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. It's Wendy and Sarah. We are back to provide an update. We wanted to get together because we haven't recently taken the time to update you as to what is going on in our own kind of paths through menopause, I guess, the best way to put it. And we've had some revelations is probably a very large word, but we have had some thoughts that we've talked about when we've been together just as friends that we thought might be interesting things to discuss here, because we're probably not the only ones who are feeling them. So I don't know, did I do that justice?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
because when we get together and talk, often we think, or we, say, "Oh, we should talk about that on the podcast." Like, how many times have we said that? And then, we're kind of just trying to tie it all together as part of. I mean, if you've been listening to us since the beginning, then it's been a journey for everybody. Like it's, we've sort of gone. We started talking about this when we were both right on the cusp of menopause, and then went through menopause, and now we're like almost a year out, really. And I'm just so interested in how that's impacting our lives, but also in the people that I see who are also around the same age in my life, who are, I now ask them the pointed question, do you think that you would have been doing this, that you could have made those decisions, or you could have taken those risks, or would have behaved a certain way 2 or 3 years ago? And often the question is, or the answer is no, that there is something that shifts on the other side. And I find that fascinating. So I think just updating where we're at, what's happened with the hormone experiments, and all that is good.
Why don't we start with the hormone side of things, with the treatments, the approaches that we have been taking, each of us in our own experience. Why don't you start and tell people where you're at with all of that?
Okay, well, I can't actually remember when I started taking I was taking the compounded bioidentical estrogen and progesterone. And I think I actually started it because my foot wouldn't heal. I had that. Yes. That's right. So I decided, okay, well, this is my sign. And I don't think I was having terrible sleeps at the time or anything. So
can you just remind people why you thought that perhaps the hormones might help with the healing of your foot, for anybody who didn't listen to the previous episodes where we talked about that connection?
Oh yeah, because I had this sort of chronic injury in my foot that had to do with like tendon insertion, and the tendons and ligaments without estrogen become a little bit more delicate. And it's like, because we've talked about estrogen being a hormone of buoyancy and fullness, that all of those tissues can dry up a bit and become a little bit more vulnerable. And I had an injury that was really keeping me from a lot of activity, and it had been going on for almost 3 years. And I don't know, I had one of those brains. So I talk about this stuff all day long, and sometimes with your own body, it takes a while for you to go, oh, maybe that's what it is. Because I was kind of stuck in the physio world, and I'd seen a sports medicine physician, and nobody was talking about hormones, and I wasn't really thinking about it. And then I thought, well, it's there are other things that I should be doing in terms of, or I should be thinking about in terms of hormones, and maybe this is one of them. So I started taking the estrogen biased, so a combination of estriol and estradiol and progesterone, which I had experimented with multiple times previously. And it was all good for about 3 or 4 months. I really felt my brain cleared up. Oh my gosh, the difference. I was handling multiple things at a time that I'd forgotten that I had the ability to do mentally. And I think my sleep improved, and I think my foot gradually started to improve. I can't make that definite connection, but I sort of, over those numbers of months, my foot improved. And then I got a full-on period out of the blue, and it kind of freaked me out a bit. I was like, and yet I knew that this was quite possible, quite normal for this to happen. I think I'd just hadn't had periods for so long by then that to have a full-on period kind of freaked me out. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'm taking too much. And I think I also might have been having some breast tenderness at the time. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to give myself a break. What I also didn't put into the picture was the fact that I'd had a COVID shot about 2 weeks before that period showed up. So the combination, we know that the COVID and vaccinations can have an impact, short-term impact on hormone balance, and kind of like flying can have an impact on hormone balance. Anyway, so I went off them for a bit, and then I frankly forgot to take them. And then I started again recently because my nights were starting to get bad. And but oh yeah, just an update on the foot is that it actually got better and then was better for months, and it still continues to be better. So it's almost like it needed, if there was a relationship, which I can't guarantee it was, but if there was a relationship, it's like it needed that extra little boost of estrogen just to get it to the point where it could fully heal. And I would say it's probably 80% there, which is so much better than it was. So, so now I'm back on experimenting with a lower dose and seeing what's going to happen with that. So, all good.
And what have you noticed so far on the lower dose with the brain fog, kind of that, if you noticed a difference? Did you notice a difference when you went back off it? And what about when you came back on?
It's been a short time back on it. And I would say that I'm feeling hopeful that the brain fog, because I really realized that there are times when I honestly feel like I should be concerned about Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that. There, and I fully understand my patients. I used to joke about it in my life in perimenopause, when it was like, I call it loss of noun syndrome. Like I couldn't come up with words for anything, and everything in my house is a thingy. Like I've got my colors down, like it's on the green thingy, or it's on the black thingy, or it's, in the red thingy, but I couldn't, find those words. And I, I was overwhelmed with other things. And so I thought, well, it's just that. And then I really, in the last year or so, have noticed that, I'm forgetting things that probably I shouldn't be forgetting. And so but I feel like putting the estrogen back in, it makes it's feeling a little bit, I'm feeling clarity start to come in a little bit from here. And sometimes you don't even know you're missing it until it's gone, or until it's back, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually not as foggy as I used to be. I'm having a hot flash, in case you couldn't tell if you're watching the video. I'm like the color of a beet. So that's, it's such an interesting process for me, being the person who's not prescribed, but suggested hormones to women so that their doctors can prescribe it. And also, kind of watch this transition in women for so many years, to be experimenting with the process on my own body, and to know what it feels like to be like, oh yeah, this is real brain fog, and oh, that felt better. That's kind of.
Yeah. So I've had a different experience with the hormones, I would say, in that I started them about not quite a year ago, but maybe like 8 months ago. And I would say the first 5 or 6 months were super rocky. So I did notice an improvement right away. Also taking a bioidentical compound. I'm taking a compounded estrogen. I don't know what the balance is. I can't remember between the two, but anyway, I've got that. And then a progesterone. And I definitely started to notice a difference within a few weeks. It does take a while to notice anything, or at least it did for me. And I started to notice the improvements was in my sleep. So I just started getting longer stretches of sleep, and I was waking up. I just found that the night sweats that I was having that were really quite intense were becoming less intense. And then gradually over time, they decreased in terms of their frequency. But I also found that there was a period where they got worse. So I had this period where it felt like everything was getting worse. And I think you and I talked then, and I was kind of panicking, and because I just didn't think I could handle it being any worse than the worst had already been. And I feel like at that point, I increased the dose. I feel like that's what I did, increased it slightly. And that just did not work. So I think that made things worse. I honestly can't even remember. I feel maybe
it made things worse. Doubling the dose made things worse.
It definitely made things worse, but I just can't remember why we increased the dose. I feel like maybe it was because it wasn't helping in the way I thought it was going to help. Like I was still having the night sweats all night and stuff. Anyway, for whatever reason, that it must've been that the dose went up a little bit, and that ended up making things far worse. And then had to kind of scale it back. And so there was a lot of like trial and error involved in it. And what I can see now, however many months it's been now, I guess maybe 8 months, like I said, into it, what I can see now is that probably if I just left it at that, because I'm back to the regular dose, the one I started with, right? Mm-hmm. We've shifted the ratio a little bit. This, me and my doctor have shifted the ratio a little bit on the estrogen in terms of those two. What are they again?
Estriol and estradiol. And estriol is less strong than estradiol.
Okay. Yeah. So we've shifted that a little bit, whatever ratio I'm on now, but the amount that like of total estrogen, maybe that's in that compounded cream, or I'm back to the original dose of that. And it's absolutely amazing what a difference it's made for me. So now that I've gotten through all the bumps of and I think I've read a lot about this, but of course everybody thinks they're going to be different. Everyone thinks they're going to be the exception. And I was like, oh, this is just going to start working and I'm going to feel great. And, everything I had read said the opposite, which is it can take a long time. It has to build up in your body. You can have, periods where it gets worse before it gets better. And that actually in hindsight is exactly what happened to me. But now that I am where I am with it, where I've been taking the same dose now, probably for 4 months since the tweaking of the dosage. Every single area where I was noticing quite severe symptoms has improved dramatically. So I no longer have night sweats, like none. I never have a night sweat. It is irregular, but I would say a couple of nights a week, I wake up feeling too hot and I'll stick my feet out, and I do not have a lot of blankets on. I sleep with a really light cover, and my room is very cool and all of that. But so I still have like moments where I get hot, but it's a matter of like flipping the blankets off and then flipping them back on. It's nothing like what I was going through before, which was just waking up and completely covered in sweat and having to like change my pajama top and like get the towels out and, get up out of bed and cool myself down and all the rest of it. I don't have to do any of that anymore. And I'm also not waking as regularly. So I was waking all the time, which I think was directly connected to the changes in body temperature. So that's the single most impactful improvement, I think, is that I'm sleeping again. And the other things that I've noticed I definitely have noticed an improvement in brain, like in clarity, focus, lack of brain fog, however you want to describe it. Definitely big big difference for me. I mean, I used to, by 4 p.m. in the afternoon, it was a real struggle for me to stay focused. Like I would have notes on my desk to keep me, and I dreaded when somebody scheduled a late afternoon presentation, because I really would have to work hard to stay focused for that. That's kind of a thing of the past, which is awesome. The other place that I've noticed real difference is in my joint pain. So it's interesting that you say that about your foot, because I don't know if you remember, but I had this probably about 6 months after my last period, it started to become really uncomfortable all the time to get up out of a chair. I felt like I was 100 years old. And listen, I'm still 50. So I still have aches and pains, and I definitely don't feel anything like I did when I was, 30, but I was reflecting on it before this episode, and I definitely don't have that same I've got to struggle to get myself out of this chair because my knees are aching. And it was really my knees where I was noticing it, which is a place that I've never really had chronic joint pain before. So that has improved drastically as well. And then of course, one of the other reasons why I was using estrogen was around I'm not going to remember the name for it. What's the proper name now? The new name for
GSM?
GSM, yeah,
genitourinary symptoms of menopause,
something like that. Yeah, GSM. Anyway, so I've noticed a big difference there, and that's because of the estrogen and the nature of that hormone in terms of helping our tissues stay moist and lubricated and all the rest of it. So that there's been a big difference there as well, which is so fantastic. So those are probably the big areas where I've noticed change, but I was saying to you before we hit record that I can't believe the difference. And I cannot imagine going back now to where I was before. And it's like that. It's almost like you don't know how bad it is until it gets better. And then you have something to compare it to. It's like, I feel like it probably had been a slow, steady unwind into a lot of those symptoms. And then obviously some of them hit me like a Mack truck, like the night sweats and the sleep stuff, really hit me hard after my last period. But I think some of the other ones probably were just slowly, as estrogen was declining, were kind of slowly getting worse. And so I'd been feeling kind of, I guess, crappy for a long time, but I just didn't really know that because it was so, it's like the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? You just slowly turn the heat up. He doesn't notice until he's,
that's so common. Yeah, that's so common because it's, perimenopause can be 10 years. So when I ask women when they actually stopped having a really refreshing sleep, so not even with night sweats and hot flashes and whatever, it's often a decade before menopause that it's starting to be, oh, I'm a light sleeper, or I'm up a couple of times to pee. And we talked to Erica about that, the pelvic floor physio, or, 2 or 3 times a week, I'm waking up in 3 and can't quite, get back into a deep sleep. So by the time, and the mood changes, oh, I'm having worse PMS, it is like the boiling pot of water and the frog, although I hate using that example because I feel sorry for the frog.
Yeah, me too. I feel sorry for me too. And I feel sorry for other women who are struggling with this stuff. And I think back on it, and again, I just want to emphasize, this is a personal decision. You need to do all your research on it. You need to talk to your care providers. There are different factors at play. Different women are going to value different factors differently. And I respect everyone's right to make a decision that feels like the right choice for them. But I have said before on this podcast, I was terrified of hormone therapy. And you know that because you and I had those conversations. I mean, the first thing I said to you was, I will never take hormones. And I really adamantly felt like that was a terrible idea. And I had done no real research on it. I was only going off of the few, but very extreme media reports that I had read or heard over the years before.
20 years ago.
Exactly. Well, for me, probably at that time, it was probably maybe 10, 15 years before that. I mean, I remember my mother-in-law went through breast cancer and had, anyway, long story, but there was that's kind of how I became aware of it. And that's all I had. And so my assumption was that was true, 100% true. and women should not go on hormone therapy unless they absolutely needed to. And in my mind, that just was not going to be a possibility for me. Then I started doing some actual research and learning around it. And I spent months reading about estrogen and the risks of breast cancer and the studies that had been the underpinning of all of that kind of media circus that was the case after that very first study, which right now I'm blanking on the name of it. Do you remember?
The Women's Health Initiative.
Yes, right. The Women's Health Initiative. And again, it's not my role, job, nor do I want to ever be suggesting that I know what's right for anybody else besides me. But after doing all of that research, I realized I had completely been misled, and that the evidence did not in any way support what I believed to be true. And it still felt risky. But I'll tell you, even though the risks are tiny, really, when you go, and again, you have to go do this research yourself. But I still felt, like, oh, I don't know, do I really need to be doing this? But now that I'm where I am, it's such a no-brainer for me, because I feel like the quality of my life is just so different than what it was a year ago when I drove into your office in tears, exhausted, hadn't slept in like 6 weeks. Just so different. So for me, it's been a game changer and really kind of a lifesaver in terms of a quality of lifesaver, Yeah.
But it's not for everybody.
No.
So, we've talked a fair amount about hormones because that's been our experience, and it's where we both kind of ended up. But lots of women do well on herbal medicine. Lots of women do well with homeopathics. Lots of women do well just with lifestyle changes. Yep. So I just want our listeners to not feel that it's hormones or nothing. It's like a process of getting to that point. Some women come in, they're like, give me the hormones. I want them now. Other women are more tentative, and I completely understand why. And we have lots of options to work with that. Acupuncture is really good for that. And so lots of women have fantastic quality of life without going on hormones. I just wanted to, because, we've been talking a lot about hormones lately. I just wanted to remind people that all good naturopathic doctors are going to have a lot of things in their toolkits to help.
Absolutely. And we have talked about how many of those things I tried and how some of them actually did work for short periods of time, but in the end I pretty much tried everything, didn't I? I mean, there was not much I didn't try. But for me personally, it was not the solution as much as I would have loved for it to be. But now I just feel very, very lucky that I had your guidance, and that you were able to, that you're just so open to all of the potential avenues to explore, and that you encouraged me to go and do some research and learn a little bit more about this, because I think you were quite well aware that I was a little bit off track in terms of my beliefs around the risks associated with the hormones. So anyway, that's kind of my update, is that I feel really, really great. And I am so happy about that. And being able to sleep is life-changing. It really is. It's just amazing, and I talk a lot about this in my practice with the women I work with who are exhausted and burnt out. And, we talk about how sleep is that one pillar of health that just so obviously and quickly affects all of the other pillars. Like it's, for me, almost like the foundation pillar, in that if you're not sleeping well, then you have no energy for movement. You have no mental wherewithal for food organization and preparation. It also screws up your appetite hormones and all of that. And you're just increasing. It's like you're just dumping cortisol on the cortisol fire, because sleep deprivation contributes to elevated cortisol as well. So it does not in any way support that stress management and mental health pillar. So anyway, I've just learned that from my own experience in the last year. It's been really clear to me how much different I feel overall, and how much better my quality of life is because my sleep has improved.
Mhm.
So that's the one thing we wanted to talk about, was more like the physiological side of things. But we also wanted to talk about more of a, what will we call it? Spiritual. I mean, I'm using the word spiritual.
Emotional, spiritual, energetic.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. We called it the other day, I think, the dawning of wisdom, or someone I was telling about it said it's like the dawning of wisdom. That's a little bit too much for you. I can tell by the look.
Now that wasn't me. You can tell by my face. It wasn't me.
I'm like, that wasn't, she would never have said the dawning of wisdom.
I have
someone else said the dawning of wisdom to me.
It's like that image of like the sun coming up on a prehistoric world. Dun, dun, dun. It was the dawning of, so
yeah, it is.
Can't go there.
A little bit National Geographic. No, that was a word that someone, a phrase that someone used when I explained that I'd had this moment of where I just said out loud, I'm kind of done with self-help, which is kind of ironic because that's kind of, part of what I do in my job. Mm-hmm. And it was more about, I think we were talking about like not really having trouble having the patience to listen to podcasts and read books and do all the things around self-help. And I, because I learn about myself by talking, I was quite surprised to hear this come out of my mouth. And then what followed was, I think I just feel like that was a useful phase. Like I was especially in perimenopause, in those years, just kind of like looking for tools to help me through this transformation, this change. This is not conscious. I can only see this in hindsight. Mm-hmm. And now I feel a little bit like I just feel settled, and I feel like I don't actually, like I'm absolutely open to growth. It's not like I'm done. I'm enlightened, folks. I don't actually have to do any more. But there's more of a feeling of everything just being calmer and less grasping. It's more like I just now, on the other side of menopause, I feel like something shifted where I just know to trust myself more. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that you can quantify it. I don't know that it's even hard to articulate it. It just is a feeling. And I think it goes along with when women over the years have told me that post-menopausally, they start to feel calmer. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit like what it feels. It's just a groundedness that comes. And this is when whoever I was explaining that to originally said, it's the dawning of wisdom. It's like that, it's the wise woman.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. We talk about this all the time, you and I, just like together, off the podcast. And you know that I have been feeling exactly the same thing happening with me. And the calm really, I started feeling months ago. And I sort of connected it to the shift in hormones and the replacement of the hormones. But I think it's more than that. And that whole idea of kind of being done with self-help, which I also feel, and have noticed myself. For me, it's almost like, I think back to the last 5 years or so. And I mean, there was a lot of transition happening for me. Not only was I going through perimenopause, I was caring for my dad, who eventually passed away, with my mom and my sister. And I, was going through that phase with my children where they had passed, there were no longer tweens. They were in full teenagers and becoming quite independent of me. So there was that transition going on as well, in terms of my role as a mother. And then on top of that, I stopped drinking. And that was a big change for me, in terms of less physically a big change for me, more mentally a big change for me, more of a, like just a huge, real kind of reawakening, I think, of my mind, and just like, oh, wait, I don't want to be in any way compromised by a substance. I want to be here for everything that's going on. And I want to, once I had that, then I was like, oh, and now I want to learn everything I can learn, and so I was in this like hyper learning phase for 5 years there. And also, as you said, you're trying to get through perimenopause. So I had all these other, this was in that kind of wild ride phase of it. And so the self-help felt really, really helpful at that point in time, like learning and building this kind of toolkit for how to survive, not just survive, but kind of thrive as a woman in midlife. And now that I'm on the other side of menopause, I think all of that work is done. This is not, again, I totally agree with you. There's so much personal growth. I think we continue to grow until we die. And so I'm always trying to learn new things and improve and work on stuff. But in terms of not knowing who I am and what I want, I feel very differently about that now. I feel very grounded and rooted. And I agree that I trust myself now to make decisions that are good decisions for me. And there is less of the unknowing that there was before, of like, what the heck is going to happen next and how am I going to do this? And much more of a knowing, for lack of a better word, around it, and just a self-trust. And I do not know how it's all going to go, but I do know it's going to be fine.
Yeah, that's a big shift. Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like I know that I'm going to do my best and go through it the way I'm supposed to go through it. There's just not that level of uncertainty and kind of panicky fear around the second part of my life, like there was even a year and a half ago. So I think that's really, when we did that episode, that I think is probably our most popular episode. If you haven't listened to No More Fucks to Give, go and listen to No More Fucks to Give with Sarah and I, because I think that connects directly to this, because I definitely still I don't have any extra fucks to give, but I'm also not like angrily out there saying, I have no more fucks to give, because I'm just like, whatevs, like, whatever. This is who I am. This is where I am. I'm fine with this. If you guys want to go out and freak out about all this stuff, then you go ahead, but that's not for me anymore. I know that doesn't serve me. I know what does serve me, and I'm doing a much better job of choosing the things that serve me, overall. So, I hope we don't sound like all smug and all knowing when we say this. We're really, I think, wanted to share this, because I think if you're not there yet, you're going to get there. And probably there are many of you who actually are there now, with whom this will resonate. And you'll say, yeah, no, I can see that I went through that period of kind of, it was almost desperate seeking for me for years, like trying to figure all this stuff out, this like tremendous fear that I'd somehow gotten it all wrong. Like that I'd made mistakes, that I hadn't, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Why didn't I do that? This real lack of self-trust, like the opposite of what I feel now. And I'm sure that all of that learning and self-help helped me get to a place where I'm like, no, you know what? I actually do know what I'm doing, and I am capable of making the best decisions for me. And there's lots left for me to work on, but at my core, I know who I am, and that's not going to change. That's how I feel. Yeah.
And I think that's what it's giving me is maybe some more resilience, and also like a knowledge about what I'm actually going to freak out about, like what's important enough to freak out about. I mean, the pictures, the whole picture scandal, Picturegate, my photogate in my house right now is that my kid deleted about 5 years of photos from friggin' whatever, Google, wherever they're stored. I don't know. And my problem is I'm not a techie, so I don't even, probably didn't do the right things in terms of backing them up or whatever. But they're deleted, and after spending an hour on the phone with support, they're gone. And so, that's 5 years of birthdays and 5 years of first days of school and Christmas mornings and all that stuff. And the process has been sad. Obviously, it's been sad, and I cried about it, and I felt the grief, and I'm still feeling the grief, but I'm not freaking out about it. It's like, it really is a lesson in non-attachment. And it's like, and yeah, it's a friggin' hard lesson to learn, but it's also like, then I sort of went back and I thought, well, when I was growing up, we had like one photo album for every year for the whole house. We didn't have 2,000 photos on our phone, documenting every minute of our day. And so maybe there's something to learn from that too. But I don't have the fight or flight response to it. And I haven't the whole time. I'm just like, allowing myself to feel the feelings, sharing that with a friend or two, and then it's like, okay, I'm just going to move on. Whereas I can tell you, a couple of years ago, I would have been kind of like angry and wired and really, really upset about it. And now I feel like, okay, this is a lesson. I'm learning from it, and I'm feeling the sadness, and we'll just move on. But it's a different way I just feel like I've got a different way of being in the world. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to freak out at my teenagers. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to, still feel anxious about their well-being, or still worry about my parents, or still worry about the state of the world, or whatever. I just feel like I've got a more solid way of being in the world. And again, like it snuck up on me. It's one of those things that it's like, oh, this is the thing. This is the thing that the women who are a little bit older than I am in my practice talk about. Mm-hmm. And I had it kind of intellectualized. I had an observational study going on with my patients for many years, which is like, oh, this thing happens. Oh, I'm observing this and that, but not experiencing it myself yet. And then I kind of woke up, and it started with that statement, I'm kind of done with self-help. Yeah. And then I was like, well, what's that about? Mm-hmm. And I'm not disparaging self-help at all. It's like part of what we do, and it's part of what it's part of really what helps a lot of people, and helped me to kind of find the little nuggets that resonated with what I needed at the time. But I feel like that's not the thing. But what I need to do right now is just really listen to me, because I feel that infused with that wisdom a little bit. Okay, you've got this. You just have to be calm enough to access it.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree with that. I was saying to you earlier that I think one of the reasons why we're both done with self-care is that we figured out how to take care of ourselves. And, that self-care period where we were reading and listening and focusing and practicing and all of that was really us learning how to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about how you feel more resilient now, I would say absolutely, it makes total sense from the perspective of someone who's in the business of helping women recover from burnout and build resiliency, which really is the antidote to burnout. Resiliency is all about creating that base set of habits that are all rooted in self-care. So what are the things that I need to be doing regularly in terms of how I take care of myself physically, but also how I talk to myself mentally, what I choose to let into my life, and what I say no to. All of those habits and practices are the things that create that cushion for you, which really is that resilience where, when something really tough happens in your life, you don't have as far to fall, mm-hmm. because you've built up this cushion, and there's a softer place to land. And it doesn't mean the hard stuff's not hard. It's still hard, but you just have this sense of, I can get through this. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass. And I definitely feel that calmness that I think is associated with resiliency. I think that really is what resiliency is. And people are just calmer and more confident in their ability to get through things, and knowing that things will happen, but that we will always come out the other side. Mm-hmm. And when I think back to when my dad got sick, which was really the height, as I look back on it now, of also my perimenopause, mm-hmm. which is so interesting. I mean, you read a piece that I wrote recently about my dad, and I talked about how, right at that time when he was in the hospital, when he first got very, very, very ill. I mean, he had had a degenerative condition for about 11 or 12 years at that point, probably. But when he got really, really sick and had to be medevaced back from Florida, it was terrifying. We didn't know if he'd survive. And he was in the hospital here for 3 months. And my sister and my mom and I were in there, along with other, family members and friends, were in there every day, sitting with him. We didn't want to leave him alone. And I just remember feeling the opposite of how I feel right now. Like, didn't trust myself, felt like wild. I just felt wild all the time. Everything just felt out of control and wild. And of course, as many of the people listening know, that is also when I decided I had to stop drinking, because I felt like everything was out of my control. And that was the one piece of my life that felt like I knew it was contributing to that, but I also knew that it was actually within my control and I could change that. And then that sort of, even though it was the peak of stress and cortisol for me and my family, I think it just was like the culmination of a decade of stress and small traumas. It ended in that. And then there was a period of about a year or so after that, 18 months after that, where we cared for my dad until his death. It felt like the peak of all of it, but after that, everything just started to get better, which is crazy when I think back on it now. But I can see how my hormones were tied directly into everything that was going on. Like, it was like the perfect storm there for me of like, just get like dumped into the sandwich at exactly the same time as my hormones were just probably wild. And also it was that moment of kind of, again, not conscious, but reckoning with my life. Like, you cannot keep going this way. This is not sustainable. This rushing, this, producing 24/7, associating your own value with how much you pump out in terms of, what you get done. That's not sustainable. So anyway, it's just really interesting to reflect back on all of this, and for us to both be now in this place that we talked about, just like at the beginning of our podcast, a year and a half ago, whenever that was, we talked about how women get to this place of knowing neither one of us was there.
No.
It's so interesting. Yeah. It's so interesting that we've kind of been able to go through this together. And that hopefully our listeners find it interesting too, to kind of get a firsthand account of the transition to crone.
Us. Yeah. We're the wise women now.
Yeah. Right. Come to us. We can solve all your problems. Not. I want to be clear. I still have lots of things that I am working on changing, and lots of areas that I'm exploring and learning about, but I'm just coming at it from a different place now.
Doesn't feel as frantic.
No, definitely the franticness is gone. And then what happens is you do have a day here or there that is frantic. And it's so obvious that is not where you want to be. At least that's what I've experienced. Like, I have a few days where, I didn't organize my time properly, and, it's all my fault. I've just like overbooked myself or whatever. And then, life happens and something drops into that. Like, my internet cut out 2 days ago. I lost power while I was doing a live coaching session for people all over the world. My internet just died because my power went out. And then I had to get back on my phone and finish the call, which felt very stressful, and then pack up everything and go to my husband's office and sit in his boardroom because I had stuff to do all day and I had no idea when the power was going to come back on. And so that, combined with just having too many things on my agenda that day, led to this day where I just felt frantic and I didn't have anything organized for dinner. It was like, it basically just like took me back to those days 5 or 6 years ago when my life just felt like, honestly, like a bit of a shit show most days. And I was like, no way is this happening tomorrow. Like, I am not doing that again tomorrow, and did what I needed to do to make sure that the next day was not a day like that. So that's really interesting to me, because when frantic is your norm, it doesn't really feel frantic. It's all you know, right? Yeah. And no wonder you're like, where's my glass of wine at the end of the day? Or give me some ice cream, or, spending hours in the Instagram, rabbit hole, just trying to give yourself a break from all of that. So.
Well, that was exactly my thought last night after having had a rough day around the photos and just some other things that happened. And I was, I don't know where I was, doesn't matter. The point is that I texted my husband and said, this day sucked. and my thought, I did have that thought of, I should just go get a bottle of wine, and which is not, it's not my go-to really, but I have had the behavior of, the end of the day, kids are in bed, everybody's, everything's shut down, reward myself with a glass of wine. I have done that in the past. I haven't had anything to drink probably for a year now, but, and I had to check that, and I was able to just look at it and go, well, that's interesting. It's like, that's a year ago, 2 years ago, I might've been like, yeah, fuck it. Like I just had a shitty day and I just really want to sit back with a glass of wine. But I was able to, and I think this is part of this wisdom or this knowing, I was able to look at it and go, that's not actually what you want. You need some actual real time for yourself right now. Mm-hmm. And a glass of wine is not going to give you that time for yourself. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no, that's great. That's exactly what I would have coached you to do had you texted me when you were thinking about going to get a bottle of wine. But the really interesting piece about that, I think, is that you haven't been feeling that need. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the same with me when I have no interest in drinking anymore. I've said that a million times in this podcast. I don't know why it would not serve me. It's very clear to me that all the reasons I thought it was helping me were actually false. But I also think the fact that my life has calmed down mm-hmm. and I've gotten a grip on stuff and realized I actually created that mess that I was in mm-hmm. and had complete control over it. And it didn't need to be that way. And I shifted things and said no to more stuff and started focusing in on the things that I needed more of in my life. That has reduced by probably 90% the number of days where I would find myself in that situation where I'm thinking to myself, oh, I know what I need. I know what I want right now. Mm-hmm. I need a glass of wine. So it's not just about when it comes to alcohol. I mean, we've kind of gone off on a little sidetrack here, but everybody who's listening to this podcast has heard me talk about this before. When it comes to those, whether it's alcohol, whatever your drug of choice is, alcohol, online shopping, Netflix, sugar, like whatever your drug is that you use to escape, it's, oh gosh, now I've lost my train of thought on this. I don't even know what I was going to say. It's not just about having tools in the moment to help you do something different. That's great. And it's awesome that you did that reflection and you thought about what you really needed. That's so great. That's exactly what you should do. But it's also about all of this stuff that Sarah and I were talking about in terms of building that resiliency. Mm-hmm. And it's about changing the quality of your days so that the things that are causing you to want to escape mm-hmm. are no longer there. Mm-hmm. So that you're creating that life that feels actually manageable and okay and not completely nuts. So anyway, all of this to say, it's not so bad on the other side, my friends. And the transition can be a little rocky, but we're here for you. And we are here to let you know that it actually all is going to be okay.
What's that sign you have in your house?
Yeah,
next to the bathroom. I love that.
I have a sign on my wall that says, not to spoil the ending, but everything's going to be okay. Yeah. It's one of my favorite little signs. I got it at a market somewhere ages ago, but we have spoiled the ending. Everything is going to be okay. Yeah. And we hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be back, I'm sure, with an update on this stuff in another few months. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Are you drinking more than you'd like, but finding it hard to cut back? I've got some great news. My popular 5-day rewind challenge is starting again very soon. This 5-day challenge is the circuit breaker you've been looking for to start making alcohol small and irrelevant in your life. Join us and learn a little more about why you drink and what life might be like if you drank a little less. Whether this is the first time you've gotten curious about alcohol or something you've been struggling with for years, this no-strings, completely free challenge is for you. Join us every day for 5 days to learn the game-changing mindset shifts to drinking less without feeling deprived. Recorded replays are available to registered participants only. Get the details and register now at wendymccallum.com/challenge. That's WENDYMCCALLUM.com/challenge.